The HOA president actually called the cops on me for trespassing in my own backyard. Huge mistake. She had no clue I'm the municipal judge who could dismantle her crooked little empire with a single signature. It was 9:17 on a Saturday morning. The Texas sun already punishing, sweat soaking through my shirt as I fought with a stubborn fence post. The metallic clang of my post hole digger echoed through the still air until the calm shattered. Whoop, whoop! Police sirens screamed down the street. 3 patrol cars tore into my driveway, gravel crunching under their tires like shattered glass. I straightened up, dirt under my nails, and watched 3 officers step out, each with that familiar hand on the belt posture. And there she was, Cordelia Blackthorne, our illustrious HOA president, standing beside her pristine white Lexus, arms crossed, wearing a smirk that could curdle milk. What she didn't realize was that for 6 months, I'd been quietly gathering evidence for a federal fraud case against her. This little stunt of hers? Exhibit A. Tell me this. What would you do if someone sicked the police on you in your own yard? And where are you watching from? Drop your state below. I'll let you know if your HOA laws are as broken as ours were. But let's rewind a bit. My name's Harrison Webb, and I've been a municipal judge for 2 decades. When my divorce was finalized last spring, I needed a clean slate, someplace peaceful to rebuild and maybe dust off the woodworking hobby I'd neglected for years. Maplewood Estates looked perfect, 147 tidy homes on the edge of Riverside County, where the air smelled faintly of jasmine, and you could still hear kids laughing outside. The house I bought sat on a big corner lot with a huge backyard, exactly what I wanted for my dream workshop. At $185 a month in HOA dues, I assumed I was joining a well-run community. That illusion didn't survive past week 3. Enter Cordelia Blackthorne, age 49, reigning HOA president for 8 straight years. Imagine a predator disguised as a housewife, sharp bob haircut like a blade, always dressed as if she were about to close a hostile corporate deal. Her white Lexus gleamed like a trophy, and she had this uncanny talent for appearing out of nowhere. Like a perfume-soaked vulture circling roadkill, she weaponized words like sweetie and hun, coating poison in sugar. You could smell her floral perfume from half a block away, a nauseating mix of gardenias and fear. My first run-in with Cordelia's tyranny started with vandalism. Some punk with a bat had obliterated my mailbox, so I did the sensible thing, bought the same model, and replaced it. Same design, same color, same height. The receipt was still warm in my wallet when I heard the thunk of certified mail hit my porch like a legal grenade. Inside the thick envelope, a violation notice so absurd it was almost funny. Unapproved exterior modification. A $150 fine, climbing by $50 a day until I attended a compliance hearing. That's when my judge instincts kicked in. The letter was full of holes, procedural, legal, and logical. I pulled out the HOA CC&Rs and combed through every page. Nothing about mailboxes. 0. A quick stroll around the neighborhood confirmed my suspicion. Dozens of identical boxes, many clearly newer than mine, with no violation tags in sight. I started snapping photos, compiling a case file worthy of a courtroom. That's when Marcus, from house number 47, wandered over, beer in hand, sweat on his brow. "Let me guess," he said with a half-laugh. "Cordelia's got you in her crosshairs." Marcus was an electrician, knew circuits and neighborhood drama equally well. His story about being fined for installing solar panels, even with permits in order, was just the beginning. Then came Mrs. Chen at number 23, penalized for excessive garden decor. Her crime? Displaying 3 ceramic gnomes, a pattern emerged crystal clear. Cordelia targeted newcomers, professionals, anyone who might threaten her iron rule. My 20 years on the bench told me one thing: follow the money. As a homeowner, I had every right to inspect the HOA's financial records. So I filed a formal certified request. Cordelia responded with endless delays, excuses, and bureaucratic nonsense worthy of the DMV. Our first face-off happened in the HOA office, a converted bedroom that reeked of cheap pine air freshener, trying and failing to mask something rotten underneath. Cordelia sat behind an oversized particle board desk, its laminate edges peeling, the whole setup screaming wannabe authority. She made me wait exactly 23 minutes. I timed it. Instead of stewing, I documented everything. The faded budget poster, the neglected community center. For an organization collecting nearly $400,000 a year, the place looked like a disaster zone. When she finally deigned to speak, her words dripped with fake sweetness. "Judge Webb, is it? Well, around here we follow community standards, not courtroom rules, sweetie." I didn't bother replying, just clicked my pen and took notes. The sound alone made her jaw tighten. That night I spread the evidence across my kitchen table. Photos, letters, timelines, laid out like a detective's board. The case against her was building fast. It didn't take long for me to realize this had nothing to do with mailboxes or community rules. This was about power, about control, and almost without question about money. A lot of money. Cordelia Blackthorne had chosen the wrong judge to provoke. Time to show her what justice really looks like. 2 weeks later, I decided to put up a privacy fence along my backyard line. Nothing elaborate, just a simple 6-foot cedar fence to carve out a small workspace where I could use my power tools without disturbing anyone. I submitted the official HOA application, paid the absurd $75 review fee, and waited. 30 days passed, then 40. By day 47, I still hadn't heard a word. Cordelia insisted my request was under careful review. Back in law school, I learned that bureaucratic stalling is often the favorite weapon of petty tyrants. Wear people down until they either quit or make a mistake. By Saturday morning, my patience had evaporated. I brought in a professional surveyor on Friday. He spent the afternoon marking my exact property lines with bright orange flags. The sharp metallic chirp of his GPS equipment echoed down the block as he worked. Every measurement checked 3 times and logged carefully. My divorce lawyer once taught me something worth remembering. When you're up against hostile people, documenting everything isn't paranoia, it's survival. At 7 a.m. sharp, I started digging. The rhythmic chunk, chunk, chunk of the post-hole digger broke the morning quiet, blending with the distant hum of Marcus's coffee grinder and the warm scent of cedar planks heating in the early sun. 3 neighbors drifted over to watch, Marcus sipping his steaming mug, Mrs. Chen offering encouraging smiles, and Earl from number 156, who volunteered to help haul lumber. That's when a white Lexus rolled around the corner, slow and predatory. 9:17 a.m. I'll never forget the time. I was checking my watch when Cordelia stepped out of her SUV, clutching a measuring tape and wearing an expression cold enough to freeze fire. She had clearly been watching from her window, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. "Stop right there!" she barked, her heels stabbing holes into my lawn as she strode across it. "This fence is encroaching on HOA common property." I straightened up, brushed sawdust from my palms, and calmly handed her the survey report. "Actually, Cordelia, every post is 6 inches inside my boundary line." "GPS-verified coordinates, right here!" She snatched the papers with manicured fingers, scanning them like she could will the numbers to change. When they didn't, she yanked out her own flimsy dollar store measuring tape, something that couldn't measure a coffee table straight. "I don't care what your documents say," she snapped, her voice shrill enough to scatter nearby birds. "The HOA holds easement rights. You're violating community aesthetics." That's when my training as a judge kicked in. One of the first lessons every jurist learns: let your adversary talk themselves into ruin. I said nothing, just pulled out my phone and began recording. "Ma'am, I have a verified survey, city permits, and I'm fully compliant with all regulations," I said evenly, keeping my tone professional, and that's when Cordelia made the mistake that would haunt her for months. She stormed about 30 feet away, still standing on my property, and called the police. Her voice loud enough to carry across the neighborhood. "Yes. I need officers immediately!" she barked into her phone, pacing like a cornered wolf. "There's a man trespassing on HOA land, destroying community property, and refusing to leave." The irony was thick enough to slice with my circular saw. She was reporting trespassing while literally trespassing herself. Marcus nearly spit out his coffee. Mrs. Chen's jaw dropped. Earl muttered something about enemy tactics. I just kept hammering, each strike deliberate, measured, and calm. 20 years on the bench had taught me that composure under pressure is the sharpest form of power. 12 minutes later, gravel crunched as 2 police cruisers pulled up. 3 officers stepped out, led by Sergeant Rodriguez, a man who'd handled countless domestic disputes in my courtroom. "Your Honor," Rodriguez said, eyebrows rising. "Didn't expect to find you here." Cordelia's face drained of color like someone had pulled the plug on her confidence. Her mouth opened and closed without a sound, like a fish gasping for air. But then came the twist that made my entire week. Instead of backing down, Cordelia doubled down. "I don't care if he's the Pope," she screeched, completely losing the last shred of her composure. "He's breaking HOA regulations and damaging community property." The officers exchanged glances that spoke louder than words. Sergeant Rodriguez reviewed my permits, survey, and deed, every document. Everything was perfect. I'd learned long ago that preparation always beats performance. "Ma'am," Rodriguez said tightly, "this gentleman is fully within his legal rights to build on his property. There's no violation here. In fact, you're the one trespassing." Cordelia's retreat was a sight to behold, a full-scale withdrawal disguised as self-righteous fury. "Well, the HOA still has to approve aesthetics and materials," she huffed, retreating to her Lexus like a broken wind-up doll. As the squad cars pulled away, Marcus walked over, grinning ear to ear. "Judge," he said, "she really had no clue who she was up against." That's when it all clicked. This wasn't about fences or neighborhood guidelines. It was about intimidation, control, and yes, money. Serious money. Cordelia had just shown me her entire playbook. Harassment, fake authority, and public humiliation. Too bad for her. I'd been dealing with bullies far longer than she'd been pretending to hold power. The scent of sawdust hung in the air as I went back to work, though my mind was already racing ahead. If she was this reckless about bogus violations, what was she hiding in those HOA financial records she refused to share? It was time to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. That fence incident lit a fire under me hotter than Texas asphalt in July. The next morning, I submitted a formal written request for 3 years of HOA board meeting minutes, documents that, by law, every homeowner can review. Cordelia's response arrived faster than a pizza delivery. Storage issues, digitization delays. Amusing how the same woman who could summon police in 12 minutes suddenly couldn't find basic paperwork. From my years handling city contract disputes, I knew one thing: financial inconsistencies always leave trails. So I began digging through the HOA's publicly posted budget reports at the community center. The numbers made my calculator cry. $388,000 in annual dues from 147 households. But where was it all going? The landscaping contract blazed off the page: $89,000 to Pinnacle Property Services, LLC. Pool maintenance, another $47,000, same company. Utilities for the nearly unused community center? $31,000 a year. Unless NASA was secretly launching rockets there, someone was playing games with the numbers. Years investigating local corruption had taught me that shell companies are like cockroaches. Find one, and you'll find a dozen more. A quick business license search through courthouse contacts revealed the smoking gun. Pinnacle Property Services was registered to Derek Blackthorne, Cordelia's brother-in-law. My coffee went cold as I sat in my office connecting the dots. No competitive bidding, no service audits. Just a steady flow of homeowner money funneled straight into family accounts, and that's when Cordelia struck back. Monday brought the first violation notice: unapproved landscaping for planting tomatoes. Tuesday, excessive outdoor storage for having a garden hose on a reel. Wednesday's gem, architectural noncompliance for using a different doormat. Thursday, parking violation for parking my own truck in my own driveway. 4 violations in 1 week. Total fines, $800, climbing daily like compound interest on steroids. But Cordelia wasn't finished swinging. Anonymous complaints flooded the city. False building reports about my fence. Bogus noise complaints claiming I was running tools past 6 p.m. when I was actually watching Netflix. By the end of that week, it was clear Cordelia had declared war. The false reports kept coming in waves, fabricated, petty, and relentless. But instead of getting angry, I did what any good judge would do. I started gathering evidence. Every notice, every email, every voicemail went into a neatly labeled binder. I recorded timestamps, cross-referenced call logs, even downloaded copies of the public complaints under the state's open records law. If Cordelia wanted to play dirty, I was going to play smart. Friday afternoon, I made a quiet trip to City Hall to verify the inspection records she'd triggered. Turns out every complaint came from the same email address, cblackthornnexpinnacleproperties.org. So much for anonymous. I printed everything. By the time I left, my file folder was thick enough to choke a paper shredder. Cordelia thought she was untouchable. She was about to learn otherwise. The following Monday, I attended the HOA board meeting, something most residents avoided like a root canal. The turnout was small, maybe 15 people. Cordelia sat at the head of the table, perfectly polished, surrounded by her hand-picked board, a few nervous neighbors, and one man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Next order of business, she announced crisply, violations issued this week for noncompliance and disruption of neighborhood harmony. That last phrase almost made me laugh out loud. I raised my hand. Before you move on, Madam President, I'd like to enter a few items into the record. The room fell silent. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. This isn't the time. Actually, it is, I interrupted calmly, opening my folder and spreading neatly labeled documents across the table. These are copies of public complaint reports, inspection summaries, and digital headers proving that every so-called anonymous complaint originated from your company's domain. The air in the room turned heavy. A few neighbors leaned forward, reading over my shoulder. Additionally, I continued, I've reviewed the HOA's financials, publicly posted as required by law. I found $388,000 in annual dues, with nearly half of that directed to a single contractor, Pinnacle Property Services, registered to your brother-in-law, Derek Blackthorn. I'm sure that's just a coincidence. Her perfectly composed face cracked for half a second. Then she forced a smile sharp enough to cut glass. That's not relevant to this discussion. Oh, but it is, I said smoothly, because financial transparency is a community standard, and if the board has been funneling homeowner dues into family-run businesses without disclosure or competitive bidding, well, that's called self-dealing. And under state law, it's a Class C felony. The man sitting beside her cleared his throat and shifted uncomfortably. Two others started whispering. Cordelia's hands trembled, barely visible beneath the table. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just let the silence do its work. I'll be submitting these documents to the State Property Oversight Commission tomorrow, I added quietly, gathering the papers back into my folder. And while I'm at it, I'll request a full audit of the HOA's accounts. I'm sure the community would appreciate some transparency. Cordelia tried to respond, but the words tangled in her throat. For once, she had no script to hide behind. When the meeting adjourned, neighbors came up one by one, some offering quiet thanks, others shaking my hand. Marcus patted me on the shoulder and whispered, Guest Justice finally made it to the cul-de-sac. By the time I got home, the sun had set, casting long shadows over my freshly built fence. It stood straight and solid, a line not just of wood and nails, but of boundaries. Cordelia had spent weeks trying to break mine. Instead, she'd just reinforced them. The next morning, the HOA's website was temporarily unavailable for maintenance. 2 days later, Cordelia resigned for personal reasons. Pinnacle Property Services dissolved within the week. Justice, I thought, sipping my coffee by the fence line, has a way of taking its time. But when it finally arrives, it hits like a hammer. He was clearly bracing himself for the financial catastrophe closing in on him. Emergency board meetings were being held behind closed doors without informing residents, a blatant violation of state sunshine laws that only piled on more legal trouble. One night, the acrid scent of burning paper drifted from behind the community center as evidence was quietly turned to ash. But digital traces don't vanish as easily as movie villains. Every file had backups, encrypted, mirrored, and scattered, across multiple locations like a decentralized resistance network. Technology had become our secret weapon. A sleek website, Reform Maplewood HOA, went live, filled with documentation that could make any investigative reporter salivate. Online petitions gathered electronic signatures faster than a viral meme. Databases cataloged every infraction, exposing undeniable patterns of systematic bias. The pinging of phones and tablets became the soundtrack of a growing movement. What started as a handful of voices had swelled to hundreds across the county. The legal setup, though, that was my masterpiece. Formal ethics complaints hit Cordelia's real estate license for clear conflicts of interest, Insurance fraud allegations were forwarded to state regulators who treated white-collar crime like a personal insult. Evidence of tax evasion was handed straight to the IRS because even HOA dictators can't dodge the tax man. Every escape path was sealed, every accomplice neutralized, every financial stream frozen or watched. Events were moving faster than I could have imagined. Prosecutors accelerate when they smell political opportunity, and they were circling now. The media frenzy grew as the story spread through social feeds like wildfire. Residents, realizing they weren't alone, began to rally. Cordelia's frantic decision to move up the annual HOA meeting became her undoing. A headlong rush into a confrontation she couldn't control, before an audience she couldn't manipulate, with proof she couldn't erase. In my makeshift campaign office, the air buzzed with the sounds of staplers, copiers, and ringing phones as final preparations came together. Every document had been duplicated, every witness was ready, every legal tactic was refined to courtroom precision. It was time to show a petty tyrant what true accountability looks like. Desperation has a scent, a cocktail of fear, sweat, and expensive perfume trying to cover up panic. Cordelia reeked of it. The morning after our war room meeting, she called. An emergency board session to vote me out of the neighborhood for conflict of interest. The logic was astounding in its stupidity. Apparently, a homeowner couldn't investigate their own HOA because they lived there, the same as claiming witnesses can't testify because they saw the crime. The community center's fluorescent lights hummed like angry hornets as she slammed her gavel in a nearly empty room. Only Sandra Mueller sided with her. Even Frank Delqua knew the legal risk was radioactive. The meeting died for lack of quorum, but watching Cordelia's face flush to the shade of an overripe tomato made the wasted evening worthwhile. That's when the smear campaign kicked into full gear. Overnight, anonymous flyers appeared on driveways like toxic snowfall, accusing me of abusing judicial authority to bully innocent volunteers. The cheap ink bled under the morning dew, leaving dark fingerprints on every mailbox. Fake social media. Profiles sprang up like weeds, spewing outrage with troll-level enthusiasm. Robocalls hit elderly residents with lies slicker than snake oil. Judge Webb is dismantling HOA protections that safeguard your property values. Poor Mrs. Chen got 3 calls in a single day before she yanked the phone cord and marched to my door, furious eyes, cookies in hand. But character attacks weren't enough for Cordelia. She wanted sabotage. Reform campaign signs vanished overnight, replaced by graffiti laced with profanity that could make a sailor blush. My mailbox overflowed with threatening letters in block. Handwriting that screamed angry teenager with authority issues. Marcus woke to find all 4 tires on his work truck slashed, a police report later, and a costly reminder that security cameras are always worth it. Speaking of cameras, mine caught Sandra Muller's 16-year-old son at 2:47 a.m. Spray can in hand, decorating my fence with the kind of artistic flair that might impress graffiti crews but not juvenile court judges. The resemblance to his mother was uncanny. Same smirk, same sense that rules were for other people. Meanwhile, HOA financial records were vanishing faster than evidence at a mob trial. A burglary conveniently targeted only financial documents. Apparently, thieves these days are very selective about their paperwork. Computer drives crashed on cue, like clockwork. Bank statements disappeared in transition to an unapproved new accounting firm. Nights behind the community center were filled with the grinding noise of industrial shredders working overtime, not to create gifts, but to destroy evidence. But after 20 years of prosecuting financial criminals, I knew digital records are like cockroaches, almost impossible to wipe out completely. Subpoenas through Patricia's office went straight to the banks, cutting past the HOA's stonewalling. Forensic experts restored deleted files from backup servers that the culprits had conveniently forgotten existed. Insurance companies, those meticulous archivists, provided copies of everything because if there's one thing they keep forever, it's paperwork. Every document they burned, we already had. Every file they deleted, we resurrected. Every lie they told, we logged and time-stamped. Then came the bombshell. Derek Blackthorne, Cordelia's brother-in-law and the owner of Pinnacle Property. Services! Reached out through Marcus, sounding like a drowning man clutching at driftwood. We met at a 24-hour diner on the edge of town, sliding into a corner booth that felt straight out of a spy thriller. The smell of bacon grease mixed with his nerves. Derek looked wrecked, hollow eyes darting around the empty room like prey scanning for hunters. "She's lost it," he whispered, stirring his coffee with trembling hands. The kickbacks were supposed to be small, just a stopgap until her real estate business bounced back. Now she's threatening my family if I don't keep inflating the invoices. He slid a thick manila envelope across the table, packed tight with original invoices that exposed the fraud in brutal clarity. Jobs billed, but never done. Materials ordered, but never delivered. Charges triple the market rate. Under the diner's harsh lighting, the evidence glowed like radioactive proof. "She's planning something big for the annual meeting," Derek warned, barely audible. "Sandra's calling city council members, saying you're abusing your position. They're trying to get you removed from the bench before the vote." But Cordelia's empire was already collapsing under family strain. Derek wasn't the only one cracking. Her husband had discovered the embezzlement, filed for separation, and taken their teenage daughter to his mother's house. The girl, humiliated by social media backlash, had become a pariah at school. Cordelia's clients were abandoning her faster than tourists fleeing a Category 5 hurricane. Shouting from her house became neighborhood entertainment. Everyone could hear her world imploding in real time. Neighbors gathered along fences like spectators at a demolition derby, watching 20 years of marriage and corruption crumble spectacularly. The media storm reached levels we hadn't dared to dream. Channel 7's coverage grew into a 5-part exposé on HOA corruption statewide. The local paper ran daily headlines that made Watergate look like a parking ticket scandal. Social media. Campaigns exploded past 15,000 locals under the hashtag #AshToMaplewoodCorruption, trending like the latest dance craze. News vans lined the streets, their generators humming outside the community center, the new soundtrack of our suburb, drowning out lawnmowers and songbirds alike. Law enforcement ramped up faster than a high-speed chase, the FBI's financial crimes division stepped in, bringing federal muscle that made the local DA look like mall security. Asset freeze orders hit Cordelia's accounts with the precision of liquid nitrogen. Her real estate licenses were suspended pending investigation, cutting off her last legitimate income. The cold touch of handcuffs was no longer a metaphor. Federal agents were drafting warrants with the meticulous care of Swiss watchmakers. Community backing hit a tipping point when 89 residents signed the recall petitions, well beyond the number required. Reform-minded candidates stepped forward to run for board seats, campaigning on principles of openness, responsibility, and basic human decency. A Take Back Our Community rally was scheduled for the weekend before the annual meeting, featuring grilled burgers and the sort of patriotic energy that tends to make politicians uneasy. The scent of charcoal and conviction would soon drift through the air as democracy prepared to make its return, but Cordelia had one last desperate maneuver. An attempt to dissolve the entire HOA to escape prosecution. Emergency court filings insisted that residents could manage themselves without board oversight, an argument about as logical as claiming banks don't need security because customers are generally honest. Judge Patricia Henley denied the motion so quickly it practically left skid marks on the docket. Sanctioning Cordelia's attorney for wasting the court's time with frivolous paperwork, the evidence avalanche had grown to biblical magnitude. More contractors stepped forward with tales of kickbacks that would make organized crime envious. Insurance investigators uncovered a pattern of false claims stretching back 6 years. Tax records revealed undeclared income that could make an IRS auditor downright giddy. The hum of my overworked printer became the anthem of justice as document copies multiplied like springtime rabbits. Everything was building toward the annual meeting, where Cordelia's rule of fear would finally meet its reckoning. Democracy, transparency, and a newly awakened community had found their collective voice. The only remaining question was whether she'd surrender quietly or fight to the end like a trapped animal. My bet was on the latter. When the federal grand jury indictment arrived, it struck like a hammer of justice on a Tuesday morning that would forever divide Maplewood's story into before and after. 14 counts, fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, all leveled against Cordelia Blackthorne. State charges followed swiftly: insurance fraud, tax evasion, breach of fiduciary duty. Her real estate license was revoked so fast it left digital skid marks in the state database. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing with alerts that read like Christmas morning for anyone who believed in justice. Cordelia's panic became the stuff of legend. She tried to escape the jurisdiction with the grace of a limping rhinoceros, only to be caught at the airport holding $47,000 in cash and a one-way ticket to the Cayman Islands. When that failed, she scrambled to liquidate secret assets that had already been frozen tighter than a politician's grin during election season. Her final plea was a rambling Facebook post begging for understanding and forgiveness, a post that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Smudged mascara and trembling hands became her new normal. As the walls closed in like a space opera trash compactor, the media frenzy exploded beyond imagination. National networks picked up the story as the perfect case study in HOA corruption gone wild, suburban tyranny meeting federal justice. I suddenly found myself on courthouse steps, being interviewed as the judge who uncovered neighborhood fraud, trying to appear dignified while inwardly celebrating like a kid on Christmas morning. Documentary producers called, seeking access for exposés on municipal corruption. The rapid clicks of camera shutters became the rhythm of accountability, as reporters swarmed our quiet. Streets like polished locusts armed with press passes, yet the truest satisfaction came not from headlines but from the healing that began. The moment Cordelia's arrest became public, the county-appointed interim board immediately halted every bogus fine. Insurance companies issued reimbursement checks with the efficiency of election year tax refunds. The scent of fresh paint filled the neighborhood as vandalized properties were restored and pride returned. Sandra Muller and Frank Delocqua collapsed faster than a house of cards in a wind tunnel. Sandra pled guilty to conspiracy, her once mighty real estate empire crumbling like ancient ruins. Frank cooperated for leniency, giving testimony that made prosecutors beam with delight. The sight of "for sale" signs sprouting in their front lawns was sweeter than the sound of wind chimes on a summer breeze. Derek Blackthorne's full cooperation became the gift that never stopped giving. His detailed financial records exposed kickback schemes more intricate than Swiss clockwork. His sworn statements about inflated contracts and falsified invoices became the cornerstone of the prosecution's case. His plea deal proved that honesty really can pay, especially when the alternative is federal prison. From the ashes of corruption, a renewed HOA rose like democracy reborn. I accepted the interim presidency with the same duty and discipline that had guided my judicial career. Marcus took the treasurer's seat, bringing the steady honesty of a working-class electrician to budget oversight. Mrs. Chen, at 87, finally gained the respect she deserved as community liaison, her wisdom now a guiding light. Earl oversaw architectural review with the precision of a seasoned veteran, and Bob Morrison continued as secretary, this time serving residents instead of concealing crimes. New rules were established with the rigor of constitutional amendments. Every contract required open bidding under public scrutiny. Financial statements were posted online each month, offering transparency that could make government agencies blush. Violation appeals were redesigned to genuinely protect homeowners' rights. Major expenditures required resident input. Reaffirming that democracy works best when everyone has a voice, the State Judicial Ethics Board examined my conduct with the scrutiny of forensic accountants dissecting mob finances. Their verdict was unanimous. Every action fell within both homeowner rights and professional ethics. They praised my use of legal expertise for community benefit, declaring that combating corruption is exactly what judges should do in private life. The sound of that gavel closing the hearing was pure music of vindication. The ripple effects spread outward like waves from a stone dropped in still water. HOAs across 3 counties asked for guidance on reforming their own boards. The state legislature scheduled hearings for new oversight laws modeled after Maplewood's transformation. Prosecutor Patricia used the case as a launchpad for her attorney general campaign, vowing to clean up corruption statewide. My wallet grew thick with business. Cards from other communities seeking help. The movement had spread far beyond our neighborhood, but Cordelia's final act proved that cornered predators are the most dangerous of all. From her jail cell, she tried to broker a plea deal by claiming the entire case was a personal vendetta led by a rogue judge with a grudge. Her lawyer painted me as a suburban Batman, wielding judicial power for vigilante justice. Federal prosecutor Patricia Valdez rejected the offer faster than a scathing restaurant review, pushing forward to trial with evidence so damning it could make defense attorneys reconsider their careers. The clang of that cell door echoed as the official soundtrack of justice served, preparations for the annual HOA meeting built to a crescendo worthy of a courtroom finale. What was once a routine bureaucratic gathering transformed into a public festival of democracy restored. Media outlets were invited for a level of transparency that would make government meetings envious. All 147 households received personal invitations to participate in genuine democracy, no longer the staged theater Cordelia had orchestrated for years. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the community center as residents gathered, eager to speak freely at last. Security measures ensured safety not by exclusion, but by inclusion. Everyone was welcome. The venue expanded to accommodate what local news called the most significant HOA meeting in county history. The most inspiring moment was seeing neighbors emerge from years of fear like flowers after a long winter. Victims of bogus violations shared their experiences without trembling. Those affected by financial fraud compared stories with the energy of a support group finding its strength. Reform candidates presented their platforms built on integrity and openness, not greed. The very texture of petition papers felt like democracy itself in motion, as residents reclaimed their neighborhood from corruption's ashes. Everything built toward one defining moment, when justice, transparency, and community spirit would stand victorious over small-minded tyranny and greed. The annual meeting would no longer be administrative theater, but a celebration of what can happen when good people refuse to remain silent, and when one determined judge decides that enough is truly enough. The only remaining question was whether the community center could fit everyone eager to witness justice served, with a generous helping of accountability on the side. The long-awaited day dawned with a charge in the air, the kind usually reserved for Super Bowl Sunday or election night. What had once been a dreaded annual HOA meeting had somehow turned into the most anticipated event in town, a sold-out performance of democracy's revival tour. By sunrise, Channel 7's news vans were already rumbling outside the community center, their generators buzzing like mechanical bees as crews arranged cameras with NASA-level precision. Reporter Jennifer Kim, whose 5-part expose on HOA corruption had captivated viewers for weeks, promised this finale would deliver justice live and unfiltered. By 6 o'clock that evening, the parking lot resembled a civic tailgate party. Out of 147 households, 134 showed up, Maplewood's record attendance in 37 years. Folding chairs lined up with military symmetry filled every corner, while extra seating spilled onto the patio, where outdoor speakers carried the action to those who couldn't squeeze inside. The hum of microphone tests mingled with animated chatter as neighbors, once divided by fear, gathered in newfound solidarity. At exactly 7 p.m., I stepped to the podium. The microphone felt natural in my hands after 2 decades of delivering rulings from the bench. Yet this moment was different, more intimate, like speaking to family rather than to defendants. "Friends and neighbors," I began, my voice steady with the authority of experience. 6 months ago, many of us felt powerless against a system built to intimidate and exploit. Tonight, we celebrate what happens when a community stands tall and demands accountability. Applause washed over the room, warm and bright as sunrise cresting a mountain ridge. It was the sound of people rediscovering faith in democracy. Then Marcus took the floor, his financial recovery report turning spreadsheets into something thrilling. With an electrician's precision, he presented figures that landed like knockout blows, $89,000 in bogus charges reversed and refunded to residents, $127,000 in total assets recovered, earmarked for community upgrades that would last years. Insurance companies had agreed to reimburse everyone affected because victims deserve protection, not penalty. Murmurs of disbelief and joy rippled through the crowd as people realized they were holding real settlement checks, money returned from the very criminals who'd taken it. But the night's emotional centerpiece came from downtown, where a live courthouse feed followed Cordelia's trial. 12 jurors were deciding her fate after hearing evidence strong enough to convict an army. At 7:47 p.m., Jennifer Kim's phone buzzed. The room fell silent. Guilty on 12 of 14 counts. The collective exhale carried pure relief. Sentencing followed swiftly, 4 years in federal prison, $180,000 restitution, and a lifetime ban on her real estate license. Sandra Muller received 18 months probation and 500 hours of community service, a fitting reminder of what community truly means when Kim turned her camera toward me for a live interview destined for the evening news. I felt my 20 years on the bench distill into a single defining moment. "Judge Webb," she began, her tone solemn yet electric, "what message would you share with other neighborhoods fighting HOA corruption?" I met the camera's lens, knowing my words would reach countless people trapped in similar nightmares. Document everything. Know your rights. Never let bullies win through intimidation. And remember, democracy thrives when good people refuse to stay silent. The camera panned across the cheering crowd, capturing unity so heartfelt it could have made Norman Rockwell tear up with pride. Then I revealed the surprise that would turn this gathering into legend. The assets seized from Cordelia's operation have been converted into a $45,000 community improvement fund. Tonight, we'll vote on how to use money once stolen from us, but reclaimed by justice. As the scent of celebration cake drifted through the air, joy mixed with triumph. The unanimous decision: renovate the playground for families, repair the pool for everyone, and build a memorial garden honoring those who stood against tyranny. Children's laughter soon echoed outside, the soundtrack of a neighborhood reborn. Next came recognition, our own civic Oscars. Marcus received the Community Leadership Award for organizing resistance when hope seemed lost. Mrs. Chen was celebrated for proving that courage and wisdom never age. Earl's patriotic flag display earned official approval amid tears from veterans proud to see their service honored. The joyful sounds of children at play underscored what normal life finally felt like again. The installation of the new board resembled a miniature constitutional convention. My election as permanent president passed unanimously, not because I craved authority, but because trust outweighed ambition. The reformed board pledged transparency so absolute it deserved to be etched in stone. Our first motion carried without a single objection. All meetings would be recorded and publicly posted, because sunlight remains the purest disinfectant for corruption. National attention followed quickly. Good Morning America featured our story as proof that ordinary courage can drive systemic change. Online, the Sparsh Maplewood model trended nationwide as other communities shared their own HOA reform stories. The steady buzz of notifications became the hum of influence spreading far beyond our borders. Law enforcement's presence closed the evening on a note of validation. Sheriff's deputies attended as honored guests, with Sergeant Rodriguez praising the collaboration that had made their jobs easier. FBI financial crime agents spoke about fraud prevention with genuine excitement, like teachers finally meeting students eager to learn. Firm handshakes gleam beneath the community center lights, symbols of democracy and justice in perfect sync. Yet the night's most powerful moments came from the residents themselves. An elderly widow, tears in her eyes, thanked me for saving her home from foreclosure caused by fake fines. A young family from Unit 134 announced they were staying put because, at last, our neighborhood had become a safe haven for honest people. The Veterans Association presented a new flag to replace the one Cordelia had condemned as a violation. With that, patriotism found its rightful place once more. The room filled with the soft rustle of tissues and trembling voices, expressing gratitude, a sound like angelic music, celebrating justice finally, delivered with a touch of communal healing as the evening drew to a close and residents filed out. Hope rekindled and democracy renewed, I understood what 2 decades on the bench had truly been preparing me for. Not just the dispensing of justice from behind a desk, but guiding an entire community toward reclaiming its voice and its future. Sometimes, the most meaningful verdicts happen beyond the courtroom walls. 6 months later, Maplewood Estates had evolved from a cautionary tale into a symbol of hope, drawing visitors eager to see proof that justice could, in fact, triumph. Property values rose by 12%, not from artificial constraints, but because people genuinely wanted to live in a place governed by openness rather than oppression. Every evening, laughter from children echoed across the renovated playground, blending with the soft splashes from families enjoying a pool that now belonged to the community instead of lining the pockets of the corrupt. Not a single frivolous citation had been issued since the new board took over, and our appeals office remained unused, a quiet monument to fairness that made residents feel protected instead of targeted. Mrs. Chen's expanded community garden bloomed with colors and fragrances, sweeter than any perfume Cordelia had ever flaunted. Her little ceramic gnome stood proudly among Prize-winning tomatoes, a silent testament that individuality and community standards could exist in perfect harmony. My woodworking shop had become the neighborhood's unofficial gathering place. The smooth texture of sanded cedar beneath my hands offered therapy for 20 years of courtroom strain. That workshop grew into a symbol of creativity and purpose, everything Cordelia's regime had sought to crush beneath its obsession with conformity and control. And the ripple kept spreading, like seeds finding fertile soil. 23 communities across 4 states reached out for advice on HOA reform, transforming our local triumph into a regional movement. The Maplewood Act passed through the state legislature with bipartisan support, reinforcing oversight systems and introducing criminal penalties for board members who betrayed their fiduciary duties. Prosecutor Patricia Valdez went on to win her Attorney General race by a landslide, running on a platform of rooting out municipal corruption, a message that struck a chord with voters weary of petty tyrants hiding behind bureaucratic titles. Her victory proved that justice wasn't just the moral path, it could also be the smart political one. One person's courage really can set off systemic change. A single voice raised in truth can inspire entire communities to reclaim their strength and their future. That truth found new life at the high school graduation ceremony when the Community Accountability Scholarship was announced. Applause for opportunity mixed with the sweet scent of summer air and possibility. Each year, $5,000 would go towards supporting students studying law, public service, or any field devoted to protecting communities from the kind of corruption we had defeated. The scholarship stood as a tribute to every resident who had found the courage to confront power, transforming their hardship into hope for generations to come. Cordelia served 3 years in federal prison, reportedly working in the law library, assisting inmates with appeals, perhaps learning the real meaning of justice once it could no longer be bought. Her restitution payments continued under court supervision, each dollar a steady reminder that crime doesn't pay in the end. Her former house now belonged to a young family whose children filled the street with the sound of bicycle, wheels and sidewalk chalk art, a street that had finally remembered how to smile. Marcus's electrical business flourished as word spread about a contractor who charged fair prices and did honest work. He hired 2 more electricians from within the neighborhood, proving that integrity could be both profitable and community strengthening. The hum of power tools became the anthem of honest labor, rebuilding trust one project at a time. Mrs. Chen began leading Democracy in Action workshops that drew participants from across the county. Her 87 years of wisdom finally had the audience they deserved. The comforting scent of jasmine tea filled the room as she taught civic engagement with the passion of a teacher who truly cared about her students' futures. Earl's American flag waved proudly now, free from any threat of violation notices. His memorial garden project brought veterans together, cultivating a sense of healing that ran deeper than soil and roots. The soft flutter of the flag in the breeze became a living emblem of freedom that genuinely meant something to us all. But the greatest victory of all was simply witnessing our neighborhood return to what it was always meant to be, a place where families could live without fear, where diversity was embraced rather than punished, where community meant cooperation, not competition. One Tuesday morning, my phone rang, a familiar tone that made me smile. On the other end was another community in trouble, this time a mountain town facing water rights corruption involving a management company that made Cordelia look like an amateur. "Judge Webb," the caller said, their voice carrying the same desperation I once knew all too well. "We've heard about Maplewood. Can you help us too?" A new chapter was calling. I realized then that fighting corruption had grown beyond a mission. It had become a calling, one that wove together my years of judicial service and my love of community in a way that gave both deeper meaning. That evening, sitting in my backyard workshop with the scent of cedar shavings in the air and the murmur of neighbors chatting over fences, I reflected on one truth that made every struggle worthwhile. Sometimes the system works, exactly as it should, when good people refuse to remain silent and choose to stand up for what's right. The celebration continued in the background as another Tuesday sunset painted our neighborhood in warm golden light. The American flag rippled gently in the breeze, carrying the laughter of children and the easy rhythm of families living free. That's what real victory sounds like, Not dramatic music or gavel strikes, but the simple human sounds of people living with dignity in a place they can proudly call home. What's your HOA horror story? Share it in the comments. Your experience might be the key that helps another community find its courage to stand up and reclaim what's theirs. And if this story reminded you that one person truly can make a difference, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell for more tales where justice conquers corruption, where communities rise above tyranny, and where ordinary people discover the extraordinary power that comes from refusing to stay silent, because democracy works best when everyone takes part, and justice tastes sweetest when it's served with a generous side of community healing. Until next time, keep fighting the good fight. Your neighborhood is counting on you.